you move towards authenticity, you're going to attract people who are also inspired by authenticity into your relationship. So that support system will gradually develop, not based on you being a pleaser, but based on you being authentic.
I'm Dr. Aimie, your guide for transforming your trauma into your gift. You adapted to life experiences to survive, but you are not your trauma. What do you see a person needing to have in place for themselves, for their life, that some sense of security, some sense of safety, so that they can step into that, be able to risk what they feel is risking the relationship and feel safe enough to do? What other support have you seen that they need in their life to be able to step into that change?
I'll answer that question, but for a lot of people, what happens first is their inability to be authentic makes them really suffer.
Can you say that again? Because I feel like that was so important for people to hear.
Yeah, the inability to be authentic creates a lot of suffering in people's lives. And suffering is a big wake-up call. I don't recommend it. But just about anybody who gets chronic illness, say depression of the mind, or autoimmune illness, or malignancy, fibromyalgia, or chronic fatigue, they are people who have not been known how to be authentic. They've been serving others automatically and compulsively. Safe or not safe, you're going to have to decide what risk would you rather take. But when disease come along, a lot of people realize, you know what, there's no choice anymore. I got to be myself. Because if I'm not, it's going to kill me. And some people do come to that conclusion. So in that case, they don't have this dilemma of what it takes. They just do it. And so that's one set of people. Now, for other people who are not in a dire situation, so they're not forced into going the authenticity route, but it's still more of an open, free choice for them. It's very true. If they become authentic, if they say how it feels for them, if they express their genuine opinions, if they are going to be true to themselves, some people in their lives won't like it because you've trained them not to like it. If you're a spouse who's always been pleasing your partner, even though it hurt you or it didn't feel right to you or it created problems for you, but you're afraid to lose the relationship, therefore you never express yourself. Once you start expressing yourself and once you start being authentic, that might actually threaten the relationship. The other partner might say, you know what, this is not what you trained me to expect, and it's not what I signed up for. That's a genuine danger. Now you have a decision to make. As a child, you had no choice. You had no free choice in opting either for attachment or authenticity. You had to go for the attachment. And authenticity threatened the attachment, therefore you're afraid of authenticity, and you still are. But as an adult, you're no longer as dependent. So it needs some inner resourcing to realize that, you know what, it might really hurt me to lose this relationship if it comes down to that, but I'd rather be connected to myself than to have the attachment relationship. I can't tell you which way to go, but that's the choice you're facing now. If there's a therapist, if there are friends, if there's a community who can support you in that, so much the better. And what you're going to find is that as you move towards authenticity, you're going to attract people who are also inspired by authenticity into your relationship. So that support system will gradually develop, not based on you being a pleaser, but based on you being authentic. And some of those relationships that were based on you being inauthentic will evaporate. That's just how it is.
It's like you're choosing to have an authentic relationship with yourself,
yeah,
over an inauthentic relationship with others.
That's exactly right. So when it comes to saying no, as somebody put it, an automatic reactive no is saying no to somebody else. But a responsive no, where you've considered your own needs and you're saying no because you're being authentic, that's saying a yes to yourself. So it is, in other words, what you just said. You're choosing to say yourself, you're choosing to say yes to yourself, as opposed to an automatic yes to everybody else's expectations. Now,
And
I don't know, you're a doctor, right? What's it like for you in the medical world, from the mainstream medical world? Do you get any feedback at all, or what kind of feedback do you get?
I think I get a lot of the same feedback that you get, Gabor.
Okay, so you made a decision.
I did make a decision.
I'd rather have authenticity than attachment to the official, respectable institutions of this profession.
Yes.
And so you said yes to yourself. And in doing so, you also said yes to a lot of other people who want to hear your message. But you had to give something up. You're never going to be the president of a medical school. I guarantee it. And neither will I. So you have to give something up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's what I hear you saying is that as an adult, we need to become our own secure attachment base.
We need to be sufficiently connected to ourselves that we actually have some belief in ourselves, and whatever support, whatever connection we can develop with other people who can encourage that in us, so much the better. But ultimately, it is an internal question of resourcing yourself, realizing that whatever choice wasn't even conscious I made as a child, when I had no freedom, I can reconsider that choice now that I'm an adult.
And one of the traits that I see coming out of insecure attachment in childhood relates to this. And I'd love for you to speak to this and share your thoughts, because in your book, you talk about the children who either become cute to get attention or cry to get attention.
Yeah.
And
well, no, sorry, that's not what I said. Cuteness and crying are automatic ways of getting attention. They're not, no, if they become habits, in other words, if that's the only way you could get attention, then you'll be cute all the time. And it's really interesting. We talk especially about women. We say how cute they are. Well, who else is cute? Kittens and babies. So that kind of expects that kind of says in a word what we expect of women in this culture, that they be cute. And what is cute? Very non-threatening. Very non-threatening. But for a baby, for an infant, cute or crying are not inauthentic. Inauthenticities, they're very authentic. They are by nature, that's how they are. And that helps them be accepted. Or the crying communicates their needs. So those are authentic things. When the needs are not met, then they become strategies. And that's the problem.
yes. And I'd like to dive deeper into your thoughts on those children who eventually give up on crying.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come to this stage where they're becoming aware of the internal tension, and they prefer, though, to retreat so much into themselves, because that's part of their coping mechanisms coming out of childhood, was just to be so self-reliant that they didn't need anybody else.
Yeah.
And so what has been your experience in working with that pattern and dynamic specifically?
Yeah, what do we call a kid who doesn't cry? We call him a good kid, a good baby. In the book, I gave in my chapter on the trauma and politics, you may recall, I gave the example of Hillary Clinton, who at the Democratic Convention in 2016, after her nomination, they showed a video about her life where she talks about this wonderful parenting she received, in which the episode is that she runs into her home afraid of kids bullying her, which they were doing. She's 4 years old. And her mother says, "There's no room for cowards in this house. Now you get out there and deal with it." Now, as I've often said, you tell a mother gorilla to ignore the fear of their infant or their child, you'll find out what mother rage is all about. So a 4-year-old running to help from mother is a 4-year-old seeking attachment, safety. It's totally natural. She's not a coward. What's the message? You're on your own. You better suck it up. What's the consequence? And people, I'm not talking politics here. I'm not questioning anybody's policies. I'm talking about the formation of the personality and how normalized culture is in our society. So this is presented as an example of wonderful parenting in front of millions of people. Nobody commented on the fact that what was being celebrated here is the traumatization of the child. Now, what is the impact on that person? When her husband philanders around with as much libertinism as Donald Trump ever did, not as egregiously, but just as habitually, she made it her fault. She said, oh, I didn't realize how stressed he was. I should have looked after him better. And she made the women wrong. That's what she did. And then when she, and more personally, or even more personally, when doing the election campaign, because it's her, everything is her fault and she better suck it up. What about her feelings when her husband is philandering around and trying to make it with a 24-year-old intern, for God's sakes? And during the campaign, she develops pneumonia. She gets dehydrated. Remember what she did with it? Nothing. Didn't tell anybody until she collapsed in the street and her servicemen had to lift her into their truck. She sucked it up. That's the consequence of that kind of parenting. That's a traumatic impact, I would argue. And what if she had paid attention to the signs that I got a fever and I'm tired? Maybe I need to look after myself for a change. And I personally think that everybody would have appreciated the authenticity if she had said, people, sorry, I got this illness. I got to take care of myself for a couple of days before I hit the campaign trail again. Nobody would have held that against her. She would not have been seen as a weak woman for that. She would have seen as somebody, people could have related to it authentically. And the problem a lot of people have with her is they just don't believe she's authentic. And again, I'm not comparing politicians. I'm just saying that's one of the knocks on her, and that lack of authenticity is a response to that traumatic upbringing that she had. Her opponent had his own way of being unauthentic. That was, I'm not going to get into that. But the point is, everybody, when I was working in family practice, in palliative care, looking after dying people, all the people that developed chronic illness had those traits of being separated from themselves. And it was quite remarkable to me how in palliative care, when people had a week or two to live, not a few of them would say to me, this may be strange, but they said, Doc, I don't know how to tell you this exactly, but this disease that's going to take my life is the best thing that ever happened to me. And what were they talking about? They were talking about that they discovered something so precious, which is their true selves. And at that point, they valued that higher than even their life. Now, I don't recommend going that way, nor am I saying that everybody has that experience, but the fact that it happened at all itself is a miracle as far as I'm concerned. Or it's not even a miracle. It's a sign of the impact of inauthenticity.